Good afternoon. This is Rabbi Sachs. Welcome to the Chai Academy and welcome to the Chai Center. So the Chai Academy is daily, try to do it daily, classes on topics of Jewish interest. And we have for the past couple of weeks been discussing the history of the modern state of Israel. I mean, if we want to go to, if we want to discuss the history of Israel, my goodness, that's thousands and thousands of years old and has an illustrious history, etc. So maybe we'll do that. But right now we're focusing on modern day history. And yesterday, or a couple days ago, we spoke about the great Ashkenazic and Sephardic divide. The Eastern European Jews versus the Jews from Arab countries and how they clashed and some pretty scandalous stuff. All these classes can be found at thechaicenter.com/academy. We actually have a guest in my office who's a regular, and he is sitting here watching me live. So today's topic, as promised, is Ethiopian Jewry. Right, so Ethiopian Jews, who we call falashes, which falashes means landless, and they don't like it, by the way. They hate the term falashes, falashin, right? They hate it. They view themselves as Beta Yisrael, the house of Israel. So who are they? What are they? And how do they get to Israel? So according to their history, the Ethiopian Jews, they are the children of one. They are the descendants of one of the children of Jacob. So Jacob had 12 sons. One of them was called Dan, and Dan, they claim they are the children of Dan. Now, they must have split very early and gone to Ethiopia as opposed to sticking around Israel or sticking around other, northern and south. They went to Ethiopia. It must have been very early. And the reason we say this is because these falashes, these Beta Yisrael, they prefer that, they have no idea about the Talmud. They have no clue of Mishnaic law, Talmudic law. They just don't know. They have no idea. What they do know is most of biblical law, but they don't know Talmudic law. So Talmudic law clearly came after we had the Holy Temple and the First Temple, between the First and Second Temple. They were writing things down, but these Falashan Jews have no idea. When we first encountered the Falashan Jews, they always lived near a stream because they wanted to assure that they had a mikveh to go to. A mikveh, of course, is a ritualarium where a woman goes once a month. It's all based on her cycle. And the Falashan Jews, they kept the Torah law of a man and woman separating during the time of the month as a biblical command. They kept that. But as far as what else the Talmud says, even with regards to separation of men and women, they had no clue. So they knew mikveh, they knew the laws of nida, a woman while she's menstruating, but they are unfamiliar with a lot of other things. Now, because of their ignorance of Talmudic law, rabbinical law, if you will, right? There was a lot of objection to them being called Jews. So, just to give you a little background, it is the belief, and definitely the Orthodox belief, is that when God gave the Torah to the Jewish people, a short couple of months after leaving Egypt, in the year 2448. We're now 5781, so 2448. God gave the Torah, and Moses came down with the Ten Commandments, and Moses explained what God wanted. Moses also explained the oral law. So there was a written law. Moses had a Torah scroll. Moses had the Ten Commandments. But in addition to that, there was also the oral law. And this is a fundamental belief, and it's all based on what's written in the Torah. And so therefore, the rabbis were skeptical. They said, hold on. If they don't know any rabbinic law, parentheses, they don't know any oral law, then chances are they're not Jewish. And there began a controversy that really festers until today. I mean, some people accept them, some people don't accept them, as you'll hear. Now, I'm not a connoisseur of conservative Judaism and their theology or reform. I simply don't know. But I don't know if conservative Jews or Orthodox or Reform theology does this oral law bit, rabbinic law, from Moses at the same time of the written law. That's probably a great divide between Orthodox and non-Orthodox Jewry. So regardless, the Orthodox Jewry, which basically rules Israel, didn't recognize it. They just didn't recognize it. And they said, you know what? If they don't know simple, basic Talmudic law, they're not Jews. Because clearly they weren't around when Moses was around, which is, which is the origin, the genesis of the Jewish people. That did change. That did change in 1973. In 1973, the Sephardic chief rabbi, Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, accepted them. He said, I hereby decree in good conscience that the Falashan Jews are Jews. Now, as we explained yesterday, there are two chief rabbis. There's the Sephardic chief rabbi and the Ashkenazic chief rabbi. The Ashkenazic chief rabbi and all the Ashkenazi followers, which would make me, I'm an Ashkenazi, right, didn't accept Rabbi Ovadia Yosef's halachic conclusion that they're Jewish. So the Sephardim did accept them as Jews, and the Ashkenazim refused to accept them as Jews. So talk about just a mess. It was a real mess. And it went on and on and on. And I think even till today, they there's this discussion and this dispute between Ashkenazim and Sephardim and others, etc., over their status. Now, what's interesting to note about the Ethiopian Jews, the Beta Yisrael, the Falashan Jews, is that they had a very limited vocabulary of Hebrew, right? But they did have the word goy in their vocabulary. So goy is not derogatory. I mean, it could be used derogatory, but it's not designed to be derogatory. Goy means not Jewish. Goy means Gentile. So even in this small Ethiopian living, with their limited amount of Hebrew, there was the Goy, the Gentile, and them, the Jew. So that was one of the reasons why Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, he said, hold on, if they're already talking like this, Gentile versus Jew, he says, we have the same vocabulary. We say that somebody's not Jewish is a Goy. Goy means nation. Lo yisa Goy a Goy cherev. No nation shall lift up sword against nation. So Goy means nation. So Ovadia Yosef said, hey, these I'm going to accept them as Jewish. Now, the Falashan Jews, the Falashan Ethiopian Jews / non-Jews, whichever point of reference you take, they came in the 70s. They came into Israel in the 70s, because in the 50s and the 60s, so Israel, right, is they couldn't come before then anyway because Israel wasn't a modern state. But in the 50s and 60s, the Ethiopian Jews, the Ethiopian Beta Israel, the Falashans, they lived in Ethiopia with no threat to their existence. Hey, Susan. No threat to their existence. The emperor, I actually forget his name. I says something like that. The emperor, he it was benign. He didn't love him. He didn't hate him. He just let them exist, and they weren't tormented. There was no persecution. There was nothing. So they were not on the radar screen of Israel at all. Right? The Jews were living there. They were quite content. They were quite happy. They were treated fairly, etc. Then came the 70s. So the 70s, there was a revolt. And there was talk about an insurrection. So the emperor was assassinated, and the entire country changed its political outlook. Ethiopia actually became a Marxist country. Now, we all know what happens when something turns Marxist. We have a history to prove it. When a country becomes Marxist, they blame the Jews, right? And Ethiopia was no different. Now, Ethiopia was itself anti-Israel. So in the 50s and 60s, it wasn't a big issue. But once Marxism became the political structure of Ethiopia, then it started to rear its ugly head in a profound way. So they hated Israel, and by extension, which is, we've discussed this many times, I firmly believe, and it's tried and proven time and time again, that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. So they hated Israel, and by extension, they hated the Jews. Compounded with the hatred of Jews, there was a famine. It was a terrible famine that ravaged Ethiopia. Who does a Marxist blame when you got no money, you got no job, and you got no food? Right? Who is the scapegoat? The Jew. So now Jews were at risk. So in the 70s, I don't know when it was 71 or 72, it became a real issue for these Ethiopian Jews. And even, according to those that didn't view them as Jews, because the Ethiopians viewed them as Jews, the Marxists hated them. So there was a problem. That Jews were being tormented, and as we all know, Israel was founded on the premise to be a godsend to tormented Jews. So slowly but surely, and quietly and surreptitiously, Israel began to smuggle in Ethiopian Jews, and it was under the radar. Did the Marxists know about it? They say they did, and they say they were actually bribed per head, per Jew, not unlike Jews bribing Himmler, to save a certain amount of Jews. And Himmler, there was Jews from Hungary, from Lodz, that was saved because Himmler was given an incredible amount of money and a list of names. This was no different. So in fact, if you know the story of Rudolf Kasten, it's an incredible story in itself, how he was the one that bribed Himmler. But that's a whole nother topic. So they were paying off under the table some people, higher ups in Ethiopia, who could give visas and not visas, just allow them to be smuggled out, and everything was hush. Now, the reason why it had to be quiet and the reason why it had to be under the table is because Ethiopia, like many African countries, were aligned with the Arabs. Right? Once again, Ethiopia was anti-Israel. They weren't anti-Israel in a vacuum. They were anti-Israel because they aligned themselves with the Arab countries. So that's why it was done quietly. And officially, the Ethiopian hierarchy had no idea, and the government had no idea. So slowly but surely, more and more Ethiopian Jews, it was called Operation Moses. There was other operations, Operation Solomon, but Operation Moses, and that was to get these Colossian Jews out of harm's way. Until the media got hold of it. So you have the media, which was not fake news, by the way, because they reported the truth. They reported that, oh my goodness, Israel is becoming full of these black Ethiopian Jews, and they printed it and they took pictures. All of a sudden, once it became common knowledge, the Ethiopian higher-ups had to take a stand. So because of the newspaper articles, the border was shut. And remember, there was starvation, so people were dying from hunger. But because of this, and I'm not sure of the history, whether the journalists were asked to keep quiet and they just did their thing, or they didn't know. You hear different things. You hear that it was just the story broke, even though they were begged not to break the story. And so Ethiopia shut it down. So now no more Ethiopian falashas can come into Israel. It wreaked havoc, because now you had families separated. You had Ethiopian families in Ethiopia whose brother, whose sister, whose father, whose child, whose spouse is in Israel, and there's no contact other than they know they're in, hopefully quasi-safe territory. But even more torturous was you had the Ethiopians who did make it to Israel, knowing with certainty that their loved ones will die from hunger. And it was like the Holocaust all over again, where you just didn't know what happened to your relative. It was one of the most painful episodes in modern day Jewish history. Right? There was a few of them. This is a painful one. And by the way, if you see, and you can Google, the early pictures of the Colossian Jews, they were emaciated. They were sick from starvation. And so they were on borrowed time if they didn't come to Israel. So you can only imagine what those left behind. And they had no idea. So you had half in Israel, half in Ethiopia, and it was just bleak, terrible times. So, the controversy, whether they were Jews, not Jews, there was a divide to accept them or not accept them. So over the course of time, more and more rabbis, not all, even till today, but more and more rabbis started to accept them, to say, okay, they're here, and they're here to stay. We may as well accept them. But they went over. They had a meeting with the leaders, the leaders of the Ethiopians, and they said, look, we'll accept you as Jews, right? Ashkenazis, Sfaris already did. We'll accept you as Jews, but to forestall any future issues of people saying we're not marrying them because we don't know. He said it is wise if you would just do two things for a man and one thing for a woman. We're asking you to please go to mikveh. Men, women, that's the last step in a convert's journey, is the mikveh. Please go to mikveh. So they agreed. They said, you know what, if this is going to clear up the mess, and you're not asking us a lot, you're not throwing us out, you're not asking us to, we keep kosher anyway, and we keep mikveh anyway, and we keep this anyway. So you want us to go to mikveh, we'll go to mikveh. So there was this, I don't know if they went one at a time, there were thousands, so maybe they all just jumped in the mikveh at once. Men with men, women with women, of course. And they did. And then the men were asked, before the last step of mikveh is, if you don't have a bris, to have a bris. If you don't have a circumcision, cut the foreskin off the penis. We're asking you to do it. Now the Ethiopians, they kept Torah law. They were all circumcised. So that wasn't the issue. But here's where Jewish law says that if somebody converts and they're already circumcised, what they need to do is have something called a pinprick. That you can't give another bris. The foreskin's gone. Sorry if anybody's nauseous. I'm quasi-nauseous. So what they do is they take a pin and touch the penis. Can't even feel it. It's a very thin. It doesn't have to be a knitting needle. And touch it, and then went to mikveh, and it was done. And they agreed. Once again, it's not a tall order. It's. I'm sure it must have been embarrassing for some, but but this is part and parcel. And by the way, and it's done now. It's done. I've attended a number where an adult, even a child, they converted and they already had a bris. So the male comes, and I once did it to a guy on he was a stockbroker. He was actually somebody on the floor of the exchange, and we were joking. I asked him, "Do you want to do it on the exchange?" So that way, thousands of people will see, and it will make. And he said no. Anyway, so they agreed. So they did the pinprick, and they went to mikveh. But here's the funniest part of this whole story. Once it was public knowledge that the Ethiopians had agreed to go through this, so in the community, I'll give you it happened all over. But the Falashans lived together in a community. It was a section of Israel, etc. So you see up north in Tzfat, in the outskirts of Tzfat, there was a lot of Falashans. So the Ashkenazi rabbis came in and they said, okay, mikveh, we're going to oversee the mikveh, and we're going to say it was kosher, dunk, and we're going to oversee this pinprick. So they did it. A few days later, the Sephardic rabbis came, who had no contact with the Ashkenazi rabbis. And they said, okay, mikveh and pinprick. And they said, okay. And then other rabbis came. So it became like a couple times a week. These Ethiopian guys were in the mikveh getting pinpricks. It was insane. It was insane. And there's actually a journalist, a Chafetz. Chafetz talks about it. He says that these Ethiopians, they said, okay, it's nutty, but if this is what they want us to do. And this happened time and time again. Time and time again. Now, until a certain point. As more and more Ethiopians were doing this, other Ethiopian Jews, other Falashas said, you know what? This is a disgrace. Right? Disgrazia. They said it's terrible. It's terrible. It's demeaning our ancestry. Because what they're doing to us is they're saying, in essence, for stole here, for stole there, they're saying we're not Jewish. So we refuse to do it. So after, I don't know how long it lasted, this daily pinprick, but after a certain point, the Falashans said, stop, enough. We're not doing it, and you either accept us or you don't accept us. And to this day, those that did go to mikveh and those that did do the pinprick are fully accepted. They have their certificate, and those that refused, right, is that, there's a divide. Are they Jewish? Are they not Jewish? Some rabbinical courts accept them. Some rabbinical courts, I'm talking about in Israel. I'm not even talking about diaspora. In Israel, accept them. Some don't. Some ask for the mikveh and pinprick if you want to marry an Ashkenazi woman, etc., or an Ashkenazi man. So it probably would have been easier if everybody just did the pinprick and went to mikveh, and it would have been over. But but they felt that they were disrespecting their ancestry, and so like a lot of things in Israel, it's a mess. So, my friends, if you want to marry a Falashan Jew, you probably should seek out a Sephardic rabbi, especially if they don't have a certificate. So, if you have questions, rabbi@thechaicenter.com, or you can comment here, and we'll be sure to see it, and others will see it as well. If you'd like to see previous classes or courses, it's thechaicenter.com/academy, or we have our own YouTube channel. Just search the Chai Academy. Tomorrow is Erev Purim. Tomorrow is the fast of Esther. So because Purim is tomorrow night, tomorrow's class will be about the story of Purim and the lessons of Purim, and also what is expected of us, how to celebrate Purim, and the Jewish law and customs, etc., etc. God bless. See you tomorrow.